Welcome, everybody. You picked the right day, the right episode to join us. We are beginning our saga on the Night Stalker, and that's what he did in 1985. And we are going to get to the bottom of all the details from the people that were there.
We've never encountered anybody like that in criminal history.
Starting today with the man who chased him, apprehended him, and put that sick SOB away for eternity. It was a nightmare for everybody in Los Angeles going through that.
It's the only time in my entire life that I slept with a gun.
You couldn't come up with a better starter kit for someone to become a serial killer than maybe what Richard Ramirez was exposed to growing up. At what point did you start thinking, there's too many similarities here, even though everything was so random? He could strike anywhere.
Well, I had to find the killer, not only for the residents of Los Angeles County, but for my own family. The first time I met him face to face, he knew who I was and knew me, frankly.
But that's when they had already pulled the guys undercover. If that secret alarm had gone off, it would have gone to LAPD and they would have got the bust, wouldn't they? I'm Tom Zenner. Welcome to One Degree of Scandalous, right here on the Tom Zenner Scandal YouTube channel with the one and only Kato Kalin.
I think we should have a disclaimer on the show. I think we should say, if you're going to listen to this show, please lock your doors, your windows, any sliding glass door, because this show will make you do that. Because, listen, I watched the Richard Ramirez story, the Night Stalker. Still to this day, everything's locked, piece of wood at my door to make sure nothing can get in. And it's all because of Ramirez.
And that's what happened in Los Angeles. But the guy who chased him and brought him down is with us in studio. How about a little fist bump right here, Gil? You know what?
I get one too. Yeah.
I'll tell you what, Gil, I love being around legends, and you are a legend. So let me thank you for your service to this city, to this county, what you've done. It's amazing. You did an amazing job on the Netflix docuseries, and welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here. Thank you for asking me to be here. I'm just an ordinary guy from the streets. It hasn't changed, and all this is big time. Any
outstanding warrants on Brian Kato Kalin in LA County? I think he's off the hook in LA with LAPD, but anything with the LA sheriffs is there anything out there you need to ask him anything?
No.
Probably good things.
When you're going to buy a drink.
I can do that.
First time you met the K Train?
Yes, sir.
You had to be watching the OJ, extravaganza. Obviously, that took over everybody's life on TV. But how about you? Did you get involved at all? Were the sheriffs involved at all with the investigation?
No, it was all LAPD. Okay. I called in a couple of tips, stuff that I had to call in. It came in. I don't know how I got the information. I don't even know what it was. And I spoke to Tom Lang at the time. I believe it was Tom. It was either him or Phil. Phil and I were friends.
Friend of the show.
Yeah, Phil and I had been longtime friends. We used to drink at the same distributor of spirits called the Code 7 downtown L.A.
I love that name. So did you form, even though you weren't part of the OJ case, you knew detectives, like you said, Vanetta is your friend. Did you ever talk about it to him and have you form an opinion about it at all?
No, not at all. Well, I have an opinion now, but I didn't at that time. When you're in the business of murders, OJ's case, I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. It was just another murder.
Yeah.
And I have my murders to work, and I don't have time to be worrying or looking at or thinking about anybody else's murder. You want to talk about it over a cocktail, but that's about it. Yeah. I don't care.
Well, we're here to talk about the biggest case that Gil covered, that was involved with, that he traced and tracked down, and was part of a dynamic duo and his whole team with the LA sheriffs that caught Richard Ramirez. It was a nightmare for everybody in Los Angeles going through that in 1985, in the spring and summer of 1985. And gosh, let's just get right into it, Gil. Sure. You were a young, new to the force, fairly new to the force, and somehow you get thrust into this case that nobody really knew about at the very beginning. You were one of the guys that could start connecting the dots early, but let's just get into it, how you became involved in this case with Frank Salerno.
Well, Frank Salerno, just so everybody understands, we weren't partners in the beginning of this case. Matter of fact, him and I, the first murder we rolled out on was not until June the 28th. He was primarily the acting lieutenant on the team. He was supervising myself and my partner and others, team members from Team 3 at the time. And he was a legend, and I was excited to have. I knew I was going to be working with him. At a Christmas function, he came up to me and said, "Hey, kid, I need a partner. You consider working with me?" And I wanted to be cool, and I said, "Sure, I'd consider it." And I went back and I told my wife, I said, "Frank Salerno just asked me to be his partner."
That's great.
And she says, "So?" And I said, "Don't you understand? That's Frank Salerno."
Yeah.
You know,
Hillside
Jesus
Strangler.
Hillside
Christ.
Strangler. He's the
Strangler.
guy that broke the Hillside Strangler case.
And so
right.
that was it. Well, that was early December. January, he called me up and he said, "How about meet me at one of the substations?" And I met him. He says, "You know that night that I asked you to be my partner?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, I was kind of in my cups." And I said, "Well, you know, I was kind of in my cups that night as well." And I wanted to be cool. You know, I didn't, he's going to let me down easy. You know, he was
Right.
drunk, didn't want me. And he says, "Well, I'm not in my cups now." He says, "You still consider being my partner?" And I said, "Sure." And he says, "Good, because I've already talked to the captain. It's going to be done." And we tried to get together, but it didn't happen until actually June, where we were partnered up.
You were the youngest person. I think you did it after 8 years. Normally, it's like a
7 years.
15-year
It
wait.
takes
But
15 years to get up there, and I had been up there 9.5.
it doesn't hurt that you were on gang division, right? You knew gangs, and they kind of
That's why they had a gang team up there, and they were just starting it. So they pulled me out of gangs on the streets to go work murders, and I was just so excited. And I was just afraid that when I got up there, the old homicide cops that they were, because the average age at that time had to be about 50 years old.
Right, you're the young guy.
And I'm the young guy. I'm the kid. I was the kid for the first 7 years that I was there.
Mhm.
And I thought, they're going to dump all over me. You know, they don't want me there. I haven't paid my dues. And I got up there, and first day there, Louis the Hat, he went ahead, Louis the Hat Danoff sat me down and said, "We have a vested interest in you. You're going to be good. We have a reputation up here. You will uphold that reputation. You need help. You ask for help. You don't do anything on your own. You may have been good out there, but if you try stuff on your own up here," he says, "we'll dump all over you and you'll be rolled up."
But you being the youngest guy there makes you work even harder.
Oh, sure does.
You got to I'm going to prove myself to these older guys.
Well,
I'm
I just wanted to work. I was like a sponge. Homicide was my dream, and here I am this early, and I just wanted to learn.
Right. And you, through the course of your career, we're talking about 800, 900 homicides that you worked on. When you paired up with Frank, I've never heard that story. That is a classic story. And he's still one. I was a little bit into the cups.
I'm going to use that line.
What was the body count at this point? How far along was Ramirez in his crime spree in 1985 when you two paired up?
Oh, you have to 2, 3, 4, 4 or 5.
4 or 5.
Yeah.
Had you worked on any
and there
of
were
the
child abductions during that time.
Yeah, child
Right.
abductions, molestations, the things that were happening. How many of those had you covered? Had you been investigating some of those earlier crimes before you connected with Frank?
Oh, yes.
Okay, so that was probably a great advantage for you, that you were maybe starting to put some of this stuff together. Clearly, it wasn't attached to Richard Ramirez quite yet.
No.
But then you put this dynamic duo together with your energy, your new thoughts, your work ethic, your knowledge of the streets, all that stuff with his savvy veteran skills, and you guys were off and running. But I think, Cato, we talked about this in that episode that we did last week, and I think it's important to talk to Gil about this as well. You couldn't come up with a better starter kit for someone to become a serial killer than maybe what Richard Ramirez, was exposed to growing up. And not to excuse anything. This guy was satanic. He was evil. He was the devil. Right. But holy crap. I mean, there was no chance this guy was going to turn out normal. When you talk about early drug use, did his cousin really make him watch him kill his wife?
Well, I don't know if he made him watch or if he just pulled out a gun and killed him. And to tell you the truth, we had that came out in the book by Gil Carrillo, and I didn't know anything about it before the book came out, and he got that from Richard himself. So I don't know how much Richard told him was the truth or not the truth.
Right, but during this time, you said there's you went into it with about 5 killings already, 5 murders.
Yes.
Are you in your head, obviously, detective kind of profiling what kind of guy this is? This guy is just demented. He's got a bad childhood. Whoever's doing this to kids and murdering, like I said, it's been 5 murders. What's going on in your brain?
In my brain, first off, let me say that I owe everything to 2 people. One was Dr. Robert Morneau, who was a professor at Cal State LA, who had took 2 semesters of 2 semesters of advanced criminal investigation pertaining to sex crimes. He gave me the knowledge to work this case. And number two, back then her name was Linda Arthur. She was a deputy sheriff, very dear friend of mine. Her husband and I had gone through the academy together. We've double dated. We've done a lot of stuff together. She worked our crime lab during this thing, and she just kept saying, Gil, you can't quit. Don't quit. You're onto it. So they pushed and they pushed when others were trying to say that I was full of hot air.
Yeah. So you get together with Frank in June,
Yes.
right? The body count is starting to rise. At what point did you start thinking there's too many similarities here, even though everything was so random? And that was the horror about it. He could strike anywhere, and it didn't matter the age, the demographic, or whatnot. He was coming in at night. He was wreaking havoc, murder, attempted murder, sexual assault. But when did the pieces start coming together that maybe this is the one guy doing this?
Second week. It was a combination of things, surviving child victims that gave the same description as surviving adult victims. And there was this one shoe print, the VIA model 440, 11.5, 12. And I can tell you without equivocation that on January 9, 1985, 1,356 pair of model 440 VIAs arrived in New York for distribution throughout the U.S. Of those shoes, 6 pair ended up in the state of California, 1 in Los Angeles. So when you have similar weapons and you have similar physical descriptions and the shoe print and things he did that cops still don't believe today, and that's Morneau on the very first one that I received, Dale Okazaki and Maria Hernandez. Maria Hernandez was a surviving victim. He made a deliberate noise. Her back was to him. She just keyed the door to go into her condo. He made a deliberate noise. He wanted her to turn around. And she turned around, and he's coming at her point shoulder with a gun in his hand. And he wanted her to see him. And Morneau says that a lot of times that is, their intent is not to shoot you right then. They just want to see the fear in you.
Right. That's a turn on.
That's foreplay for him.
Yeah.
This is a sexual deviant. So she saw him. He shot. And this was right after she had hit the button on the wall to close the garage door. That gives him 8 seconds for him to get up to her. And Richard will later tell me that when he fired that gun, he thought he was dead.
Mm-hmm.
He thought he was ill because his ears were ringing. It went pitch black. He didn't know what to do. He pulled on the door that she had already keyed and just pushed her body out of the way because he fired and it knocked her down to the ground. Fortunately for her, she had a set of keys in her hand. The bullet struck the keys and never exited her hand. And she went running around the condo through the alleyway there. And, excuse me, as she's running out, she hears a second gunshot. And she knows that her roommate, Dale Okazaki, was inside. So she goes around. He comes out the front door. She thinking he's going to come out the garage door. He went out the front door. There's a second confrontation. And they play cat and mouse around a Volkswagen. And finally, Maria just raises her hands and says, "Hey, don't shoot me. You've already shot me once." And Richard put the gun down by his side and walked away. He didn't.
That is amazing.
You know,
It
so
is.
there is no more fear. And this is in the back of my mind. And then
Right.
Dale Okazaki, she shot right in the forehead, and it's close distance. And there was a countertop. She had an abrasion in the back of her head.
Mm-hmm.
Why didn't he shoot her in the back of the head when he had the shot? He didn't. He hit her, knocked her down, waited for her to come up. He stood on the other side of the counter,
Waiting for her to pop up.
waiting for her to pop up. When she popped up, he's right there, and then he popped her in the head.
So, it's like a two-parter for me. You had, right when you started the story, you said that you knew it was one guy. You knew, but
Yes.
you shared that story with the veteran detectives, and they were telling you, the new guy, no, it's not one guy.
Yes.
So that was an important part because you ended up being right. Hindsight, you actually were right, and that's the only time Frank Salerno said on the dock, Gil got it right. Am I correct to say that?
Yeah, that's what he did, and that's what was going on. And the guys in my unit although they didn't believe in me, they were kind, at least to my face. But you'd go outside, city Monterey Park. We did looked at their murders, and and they were not calling me Mother Superior. I had a friend over there said, Gil, every time you walk out, I mean, they're calling you every name in the book. I'm a young punk Mexican trying to make a name for myself.
Right.
And so it wasn't easy.
Yeah, that's difficult because you're trying to do your job. It's hard enough to start with,
Sure.
and then you're not getting this. So it's almost like a form of hazing, almost. Even though in the back of their head they want you to find this guy, I'm sure, but they're not going to make it easy for you. The thing about Richard Ramirez, it's so horrifying. He comes in dressed in black. It's night. Yeah, and then if these victims get a look at him, I mean, he does look like the devil, which just amplifies the horror of all this. But part of what he did was just so random. You never know where he could strike. But he did almost have a bit of an MO, didn't he? As far as if he walked into a home that was a couple, he would kill the man or shoot the man first, and then he'd be there for a while, right? And just wreak his havoc. And he just seemed like he wanted to just pump out the maximum amount of fear and horror and torture that he possibly could. But didn't that happen often where the man would be killed and sometimes the woman would survive?
If there was a man in the place, that was the obstacle. He'd eliminate the obstacle to get to his object of lust. However, the women survived, and that was only because if they acquiesced to his orders, they survived. If they didn't, if they put up a struggle or screamed or did anything, then they died. And his only consistency was his inconsistency in the choice of victims, where the locations were, the method of murder, because he did it with knives, guns, different caliber guns, blunt force trauma, manual and ligature strangulation, shod foot. He stomped one lady in the head, so it was just different.
So, Gil, Ramirez, did he just drive I mean, they said that he liked yellow houses. There was all these theories. Did he just drive and just by luck go to a door that wasn't open, go to a window that's not open? Did you think that he did like a stakeout before? Or do you think it was random? He went from Glendale to Sun Valley. Is this guy just driving to find out, taking a chance? So that just intrigues me so much. How was it random?
First off, it was random. And he laughed at the fact we talked about the yellow houses.
He laughed to you, right? You're sitting there with this guy.
He laughed at the news media putting out that they were yellow houses.
The thought that could be part of his plan.
Because if you look, the news media was saying, yellow houses and near freeways. Well, you can't drive in L.A. County other than being in Hollywood if you're not near a freeway. And yellow houses during that time, they were going through earth tones. So you had everything was beige, earth tone, yellow. And so a lot of that was just stuff that the news media was putting out. Richard laughed at it. He thought that was funny. Richard would drive around, hot summer, windows open. He'd look and see what was inside. And a few of the houses.
Oh my God! Did he park the car, look around? You mean, and
just drive by
and see a window,
and see what kind of people were inside, what kind of residence it was. And he says that Asians, he loved Asians. He lusted after Asian women, and he said that Asians had better property. And he was misguided. He thought that the cops wouldn't really work the Asians because they didn't like them.
Oh my God, this is so interesting.
Yeah, and
I apologize on the air of this cough.
No.
Public.
No. Your storytelling is phenomenal, Gil. It really is, and that's what carried that Netflix docuseries. Everybody that watches that has the same compliment for you. Describe the fear in LA. Cato and I talked about it in the previous episode, but it was palpable, right? I mean, this was on the local news every single night. Everybody was talking about it. I can't believe people are still leaving their doors unlocked and their windows open when this started picking up momentum in the middle of the summer. But could you feel it? Was it almost like a dark cloud, this heavy feeling that people had in the city?
I personally, we didn't have time. I didn't have time to watch the news. I wasn't watching the news. I was focused. I can tell you that it was difficult. I can tell you from a personal perspective. My wife, and I had 3 kids at the time, 13, 10, and 7, and they were scared. They were frightened. As a matter of fact, my wife moved out.
Right. Pearl, am I correct?
Pearl, yes. Pearl took the kids August the 8th, 4:30 in the morning, because he was going to hit. She asked me where I was going.
Right.
And I told her, and it was about 5 minutes away from where I lived.
Yeah.
And
Phone rings at 3 a.m.
Yeah,
and you're
we're
going
not-
to the crime scene. She says, I'm out, right?
Yeah. She says, I said, now that you're up, maybe not now. Don't go to the store now, but go back to sleep when you get up. Maybe about 3 in the afternoon, I'll bring it on. Anywhere 15, 20 people down here. We'll have some lunch. Just cold sandwiches, nothing big. And she, who I refer to as Sister Mary Clarence, the religious, nice lady that she is, she just looked at me and said, bullshit, I'm leaving. And my oldest daughter, 13-year-old, she heard us discussing things. And she said, should I wake up brother and sister? And she says, yes. They don't have to get dressed. Just get them up in their pajamas. We're leaving. And she didn't even pack suitcase. She just grabbed bags and took out. She said, we're not coming back till this is over.
But going where?
She went to her, it was between her house and my mom's house. It appeared that people were safer in numbers than they were.
Got it.
The fewer. So I felt safe. And you keep mentioning the documentary. And for those who had never seen it, and I had never seen it, as soon as it was over, I apologized to my wife and asked her for forgiveness, because during that time period, there was no time for Dad. There was no time for anybody. And her job was take care of the house, take care of the kids.
Right.
My job was catch killer, and I never factored in the fear factor. She was scared to death, and I wasn't there for her.
Right. The life of the wife of a detective working a murder, working homicide, there just has to be so much stress. And I know your background, Catholic, there's no divorce. There's no way she's going to leave you. But the stress has just got to just be just mind blowing for her, right? She's saying, I don't see him. We got 3 kids, and your focus is for the people, the citizens, so this guy's didn't kill anymore. Because like Tom said, you're watching the news. And when I was watching it, every day you'd go, who's he going to kill today? What's the next killing? It's, L.A. was 100 degrees at night. The windows are open and certain people, they're taking a chance. But your job is to, listen, you're saying to Pearl, I got to find the killer.
Well, I had to find the killer, not only for the residents of Los Angeles County, but for my own family.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, this was bigger than just any other case. I mean, there's a huge responsibility, and I'm sure your wife understood that. It's almost like being the coach or the wife of a football coach.
No, my wife
Long
didn't
hours, it's
understand
part
it
of
at
the-
the
she
time.
didn't?
No, she understands now.
Okay, but
she didn't then.
how about there had to be a sense of relief for you with her leaving, though, because now she's going to be safe. You don't have to answer to her. If the hours get late, if you grab a drink with Frank late in the day, that had to take some of the pressure off for you.
Oh, it did.
Yeah.
Without a doubt. I can tell you right now, during the Night Stalker case, I was drinking Cuervo Gold. And so I'd sit there, and we didn't have time to go out and have a bunch of drinks and get drunk or do anything like that. I mean, we were tired. We were working hard. But if you take one Cuervo Gold, you may as well have a dozen of them, because your breath smells.
Busted.
It is. And I'd get home, and
She goes, you're drinking.
wife would sit there and say, had another late night, and I'd say, yeah, you wouldn't believe it. And she'd go, no, I guess I wouldn't. It smells like you've been drinking. So I didn't have to answer those questions. And of course, I couldn't share with her everything that I was going through and everything that was going on because of the confidentiality. So I was relieved, and I thought she'd be safe. And
Be honest on this. Do you smell the Jim Beam on his breath?
Jim Beam, give me some credit here. This is Knob Creek.
I had to go with that.
Could be worse.
I can tell he's not a real drinker.
Gil, let's go, man. I'll get into the cup with you.
I don't know,
I'll
man.
get into the cup.
This guy's pretty good.
I'm a pro. I can handle myself. I may walk into a glass wall and crack my head open,
but Jim Beam, that's not your top notch.
No.
I know.
I
That's why I
wouldn't be
said,
drinking that.
He's 4 cups in.
Hey, Gil, you got it. When you're in the middle of this and it's taken over your life, as it clearly has, and the pressure is mounting to find evidence, to put pieces together, to communicate with the public, to see who this creep is. When did the satanic element of this cross your radar screen? As far as, was he leaving clues everywhere with the Satanism?
He left a clue. You have to remember that you're only as good as the knowledge you have with you. And I didn't know anything about Satanism. I didn't know about the pentagram.
The pentagram.
I didn't know any of that stuff. So the pentagram showed up in Monrovia but we had sent another crew had gone out because we didn't know. You never know if this is a serial case, what it is, unless there's a few things that pop up. And like I said, his inconsistency made it difficult to say this is one. So every time you get a murder, you better start handling it as if it were going to be a serial. So he left a pentagram on the wall and on the leg of the victims in Monrovia. But prior to that, he hadn't indicated one way or another that this was satanic in nature, and we didn't find out until later.
Do you know how serial killers sometimes have souvenirs? Did he have souvenirs? Did he keep stuff after you had the arrest and checked out where he lived? Did you find anything?
We didn't. We found recovered stolen property through found his fence and found out where he had sent some of his stuff to. The only body parts that were ever missing on Mrs. Zara, he cut her eyes out.
Yeah.
And that part of the verbiage that he was saying to adult females is, where's the money, where's the jewelry, shut up, bitch, and don't look at me or I'll cut your eyes out. So I can only imagine that he's a man of his word.
Yeah.
She was an attorney,
Oh.
and she had to be looking at him, and he cut her eyes out.
Yeah, you don't want to get the wrong idea of this guy, because he did have his groupies and his fans, but man, this guy's as evil as they come. And robbery was part of this. He would steal. He would steal jewels, whatever he get his hands on. That's probably how he financed everything. That's probably his only income, I would imagine, is right. And he'd done that, since he was young. He's always been stealing and a thief. I'd mentioned his upbringing. His dad was abusive. I heard in the docuseries that his dad tied him to a cross in a cemetery to punish him one time.
His dad, I don't remember where that came from, but I know he had told us that his dad would beat him with a hose, and in order to get away from his dad, he'd go sleep in the cemetery. Because I made a comment, I said, Jesus Christ, didn't that scare you? Didn't that bother you? Oh, no, it was comfortable.
God,
it's
better than being beaten, I guess.
Yeah.
So, yeah, he had drug abuse since he was 12. He was on coke and heroin, and his cousin who served in Vietnam made him look at pictures of carnage from Vietnam war scenes. So you could see this is a very toxic mix that led to a lot of this. Did you get the impression at all during the summer of 1985 that he was following the media coverage and he was into this?
Oh, there's no doubt in my mind
did the killings get more savage, or was he trying to leave any messages for authorities?
No, he was just following, just like any killer would. They want to find out how much the cops know, so he's following it. And people, as an example, in Monterey Park, when he killed the Doys in May, the chief of police released the blood-curdling 911 call that you hear on television, radio all the time. Please help, I've been shot, send police, send help, and my wife. And so he released it. That was the last time that Richard ever left the phones intact. From then on, he cut all the phone lines. So he's following the news media. And the first time I met him face-to-face, he knew who I was and knew who Frank was.
Yeah, and it just blows me away. Yeah. What I'm thinking in my head right now is just when you're sitting there in that interrogation and talking as a human to this guy who's not human, but you're talking about did sleeping in a cemetery scare you? But you're it's part of your image. You're making it comfortable for him, to relate to you, and kind of working him sort of to open up.
Yeah, because you wanted to crack it, talking to him. We'll get to that. We'll get to the interrogation after the arrest and whatnot. The media played a big role in this. Eventually, you could use them as a tool, but you also had to manage them a little bit, making sure that that became part of the story. We'll get to that. What was a typical day like for you and Frank? You would show up early morning, and then a lot of times it would end with a crime scene, I would imagine. So was it crime scene, paperwork, talking to other investigators, exchanging information with different jurisdictions and trying to get some sort of cohesive thing going here where, you could follow the leads and start putting this together?
First, you have to remember that the several cases, Frank wasn't with me. We started in June together, and a very, very typical day. The first murder we got, we met at the crime scene. That was Patty Lane Higgins on June 28th. And when we met there, we processed it and worked it just like any other murder. In the back of my head, I'm looking for things that are going to match up with what I already know, because although I wasn't going to every crime scene, I knew every bit of that case. I'm studying it from case to case to case, and I knew it. Not many people, including Frank, I believe, were of the opinion that it was one person or a serial killer. And it really wasn't until the 5th of July when, at the residence of Whitney Bennett, who survived, he saw, Giselle Lavigny from our crime lab called us in about 12:30 in the afternoon and said, fellas, there's something in here I think you ought to see. And I went in there, and on a comforter was a bloody Avia shoe print. And I just said, kiss my ass. And Frank said, yeah, kiss your ass. And once we got done looking at it, we went back outside, and he called the captain that day and said, we got a serial killer. So once he said that, it was now Frank Salerno saying it, who everybody trusted and believed. He was the Goomba.
Right.
And so then we started getting what we wanted.
I had a pair of Avia shoes in the mid-'80s. I'm not joking. And they weren't well known. It wasn't like Nike.
No.
Had you ever heard of them before?
No, never heard of them. There was a brand new shoe that came out in January. It was the first time they'd been distributed. The guy that had the patent was an Oregon Duck coach, Jerry Stubblefield. He worked, he did track and field over there. And we pulled two guys on their day off the golf course, which upset them, and said, find this shoe. And they said, where do you want us to start? They were not happy. And I said, I don't care. Start at the Orange County line and work west.
Yeah.
And they were able to find the shoe, and which led us to Jerry Stubblefield, and the rest was history.
Hey, by the way, I wear size 12. Don't judge me. I wasn't in L.A. that summer. Okay, I was graduating from high
And they were
school.
black. They were black.
Oh,
which
they
made
were?
them, yeah,
Okay.
which made them unique.
Mine were white.
Yeah,
Okay,
black
I'm
made
off the
it
hook.
Easier for you guys because how many black
Exactly.
ones were you have to assume he's wearing black on black. He's doing this all at night.
That's
Go
go ahead.
I was going to say, besides the shoe print, I'm addicted to forensic files at any kind of crime show. You guys find his hair? I imagine his hair's
We didn't find his hair. We didn't use much stuff that could be used in the lab. Excuse me. Could be used in the lab because we didn't have DNA back then. Serology could only tell you what kind of groups it was, and so we didn't use them much. We didn't find any hair follicles.
And no big database for fingerprints. Think about what an advantage that
It was
would be.
they only had felonies,
Right.
convicted felons on through the computer.
So you're hoping for a print. Every
Right.
crime scene, you're hoping you can pull a print. But a shoe print for an Avia size 12, that's almost as good as a footprint or a fingerprint, isn't it? I mean, that's
is.
that's a legit clue that could get
It-
you guys
Oh,
going.
it was. Frank said, it's just like it's almost like a fingerprint. It was nice and easy.
It reminds me of the Bruno Mali shoes for OJ.
Sure.
Right? It's a very rare shoe. You pin it down to the size, and then you start tracking it to see how many are in this area. So was that the next step then?
Sure,
You get a hold of the manufacturer, the distributors, and
We
the
got a
retail-
hold of. We sent. There was a little guy, Jerry Burke, who was a brand new individual assigned to the lab. He looked like a little kid, and he knew that I was always joking. I was always lying. That was just my nature. And I walked up to him and I said, "Hey, Jerry, we need you to go to Oregon." He says, "Okay, when am I going?" I said, "This afternoon." He said, "Come on, get out of here." And when I explained to him, and I said, "No, I'm serious," and I reached into my pocket, I said, "Here's the cash.
Go.
You're going today."
Here's some petty cash.
And so he went up there and met with the patent holder, and he's the one that directed him to all the distributorships and got us all the background we needed.
Yeah, I thought about that, Tom. Actually, I was thinking about how these cases, how much a shoe is important. The Bruno Malia, was that Malio?
Mali.
Bruno Mali.
Mali.
The Bruno Mali shoe at OJ, and then the Ramirez, the Avia shoe. Different tax bracket, but it's still that shoe. It's like the importance of the shoe print. It's like,
and those are the two biggest cases in LA history.
I think of OJ and the Bruno Mali all the time because I can't tell you the last time I went into a shoe store. I buy all my shoes. Here's a plug for Zappos. I buy all my shoes off of Zappos online, And as I'm going through them, I see the Bruno Mali in there all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that right. And then
Almost $500 for those things.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and how he said he never owned an ugly ass pair of those, and there's photos of him wearing those shoes.
You're saying that OJ lied? What? All right. Okay. You and Frank get together as a team in June. Things are picking up. The murders start escalating, sometimes even two different crime scenes in a night. The city starts panicking. You guys are doing everything you possibly can. What was the support like from the sheriff, LAPD? Was this a coordinated effort, or did you guys feel like you were Lone Rangers?
No, the first thing we did, and Frank, this case, if Frank had never existed, the case would have been solved. It may not have been solved as quick as it was, because the knowledge he had in his head, it was second to none.
Mm-hmm.
First thing we did was we met the two lead investigators from LAPD. And we went and broke bread with them and told them, we just discussed, hey, we don't care who gets the arrest. We don't care what goes on in the department. We don't give a hoot about the executives of the department. Let us not keep anything from each other. So we met at least 4 times a week to just exchange information. And it was the greatest working relationship with LAPD that I ever had. They were great to work with. That was number one. The pressure put on you by the executives of our department, the sheriff, knew about my mother, and my mother called me Mijo.
Was it Sheriff Black? Is that his name?
Block.
Block, yeah. No, he was Caucasian.
No, I meant. Wait a minute. Good one. And then Bill Gates was LAPD commissioner
Bill Gates,
at the time.
Brad Gates was the sheriff of Orange County.
Yeah.
And he would, we'd have meetings in his office, and he'd say, the sheriff will be just as proud of you as you are, Mijo. If you can solve this. I said, we'd like to, and he let us have what we wanted. But Frank did things. Frank knew, because of the Hillside Strangler, we have to stay on top of the news media. We're not going to be chasing the news media like we did in the Hillside Strangler.
Mm-hmm.
He had one guy assigned, Louis the Hat. We made him our clue custodian. All clues would be run through him. We then, by this time, had a task force going within our bureau where we brought in about 30 other investigators from outside units, hooked them up with a homicide detective so they could continue handling homicides. And those other the 30 that they replaced, they came to work the task force to work with us. And Louis would give them a clue, and then everything was computerized. So Louis was assigning all the clues, and that Frank said, we got to do better because Hillside Strangler, they were using 3x5s, and they used to call it clue in a box. Now computers here, so it was his wisdom and the ability to handle the news media. And I remember asking Frank, is it wrong for me? I'm not God, but is it wrong for me to want somebody else to get murdered? Because we needed more clues, needed more help. We weren't getting what we wanted. This guy was good at he was good at what he did.
That's quite a revelation. That you would even think of asking that question, that you did ask the question, but I mean, we've never chased a killer like Richard Ramirez. Mm-hmm. Not that you wish harm or death on anybody, but you want this thing solved.
Yes.
How did Frank respond when you asked him that? Had he asked himself that same question?
I really don't remember, but Frank always had good answers for everything. He'd ask, I'm sure he didn't think anything evil of me,
right?
And may have even agreed with me. But Frank, being the stoic leader that he was always kind of quiet, he just listened and gave advice when I asked for it.
Do you think Ramirez was thinking that he said he'd watch the news to see, like the yellow houses, and he was kind of laughing about it. Do you think that he is so narcissistic that he's going, I haven't been in the news for a while. I think I'm going to do another killing because he wanted it to be in the news again, or the Night Stalker to be in the news again. And he's probably loving that they labeled him the Night Stalker.
He did like that.
And he's thinking, I haven't heard my name in a bit, that he would go out and murder.
I have no idea what drove him. He asked me at one time.
But you like my theory.
Yeah, your theory's good. He just asked me, why do you think I'm evil? Why do you think I am the way I am? I told him, Rich, I don't know. God, if I knew that, I'd be a doctor making a lot more money than I am as a cop.
It's funny he asked you that, though. He
Yeah.
probably really was curious. Like,
Oh,
what drove me to do this?
He and he was well read. You know, he sat there. He called me Gil. I called him Rich. Frank called him Mr. Salerno.
Respect, because he knew him.
Yeah,
he knew of him.
He knew of him. He knew all about the Hillside Strangler.
Wow.
And I asked him. I said, Rich, you know, you and I are Gil. You know, I'm Gil and you're Rich. Mr. Salerno, why? What do you think? He was 7 foot tall and Hubbard? And I said, he puts his pants on just like you and I, one leg at a time. No, but that's Mr. Salerno, Gil.
It's almost like he's in this fraternity of serial killers or like this high-level athletic league or something where there's the OG, Frank Salerno.
Exactly.
You know, he's the guy that got the Hillside Strangler. I'm well aware of him. I'm trying to avoid him in apprehension. Here's his young partner on my ass, right?
What I can't believe, though, is that when the killings are going on and it's on the news every day, and the way he looks, I can't believe that someone's not going, I think that's the killer, that there'd be phone calls coming in that you might want to check out this neighbor of mine, whatever it is, because he has that, regardless, he's got that look just to find out who this guy is. And is he hiding in his house until nighttime? And did he have any social life?
Well, you have to understand the people he's hanging around with, he's living down in Skid Row area. So there aren't many people that are going to be enthusiastic about calling the cops about anything.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And he's doing everything at night. So during the day, he's not around
Right.
to do this
And it's
stuff.
probably dark when the victims see him. You're in a state of panic. But you're right. One look at that guy and you will not forget his appearance. And he smelled bad, the whole thing. He fit the whole typical nightmare vision of what you think a serial killer is. That was him.
I don't know. That's to everybody else. You know, I don't look at him through the same eyes as
That's
normal people because this is a job. It was death. He's just another human to me.
Yep.
But you never got spooked being in that room with him. You were kind of
No. Matter of fact, you mentioned it. I'll use the analogy you did when you referred, because that question gets often asked. Was I nervous? Was I intimidated? He's into Satanism. He's killed all these people, and there's nothing in there but him and I and my partner. And I tell him, no, it's just like a quarterback from a football team.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Monday through Saturday, I mean, he's dad, he's the brother, he's the husband, he goes to the bar and drinks with his friends. It's all he is, just a normal human being. Sunday, he gets to that field and puts that helmet on, and now everything is out of his mind except for focus on that football game. Everything was out of my mind except for going into that interview room. I knew what I wanted to do. I knew what I had to get done. I knew how I wanted to handle it and how I wanted to talk to him. So I didn't see anything else. He's just human.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then as we get into July and then into August, it's heating up. You've identified it's a serial killer.
Mm-hmm.
He's striking frequently, the brazen, violent, horrific attacks. You get a clue. You get that one card, the business card for the dentist, which was a game changer, obviously. But was there a point before that where you were totally dejected and thinking, I don't know if we're going to get this guy? We are running uphill in a marathon in quicksand, and this is getting us nowhere.
There was never a time where I didn't think we would get him. It was just a longer hill than I thought it was going to be, because that's why I said, is it wrong for me to want him to kill somebody else?
Mm-hmm.
Because I wanted that clue. I didn't want to just give up and this is it. This is over with. No. He was hurting too many people, and my family was at risk. And that's why I apologized to the wife. I was never afraid. I always had a gun or I had partners with me. And my wife and a lot of the residents of Los Angeles County had nothing. They had every right to be fearful. So never did I feel that dejected where I didn't want to continue.
But like what Tom said, though, when the dentist, that whole clue, then you have a name. And then you got to be feeling with Frank like, we are so close. We are so close.
We were getting closer. The name on the card said Richard Minna.
Mm-hmm.
And fictitious name, we immediately put 2 investigators, Asian investigators, inside this Asian doctor's dental office. They made bank. They were making money overtime.
Right.
This
Just sitting
doctor-
there, right?
Yeah, this doctor was open 7 days a week, 12 hours a day,
Yeah.
and they did that. But
And then you missed him. That one. The odds are that he came in and the doctor had said, "Where are you guys?"
yeah, we an executive who will remain unnamed at this time, and it wasn't the sheriff, but somebody very close up there to the sheriff, told us, because the doctor's office was in LAPD's area, and they had these silent robbery alarms that they could hook up right, and they were hooked up right to their office downtown, which means cops would have been there right away. He said, "This has cost us a lot of money. He may never come back there. Let us just pull our guys out, have LAPD put the robbery alarm in there, and let them handle it." So that's what we did.
Mm-hmm.
And the first day they put it in, that night I get a phone call from the doctor saying, "What happened? Come.
Ugh.
And he had pressed the alarm. It was a malfunction of the alarm.
What are the odds?
Yeah.
So the next day, I mean, hindsight's 20/20. Next day, the executive said, "Well, put the guys back in there."
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Here, let me give everybody a little bit more background on this, because this was the game changer. This is the one that really helped and, accelerated things. So there's a stolen car that had been sitting out in the sun for days. LAPD was supposed to process it for prints, but it got stuck like in an impound lot or some hold for prints. And the sun was just, baking on that thing, and all the prints were gone. But they were able to, I think, found a business, or somebody found a card that for a dental office for an appointment. And you, or whoever it was, man, this is brilliant. You go to that dentist and you talk about this guy, and you're able to pull the dental records, and you could see that he has just got this mangled mouth. He has got
Right.
some jacked up teeth. The dentist said, "Yeah, I did this, and he's going to be coming back." Or your dentist friend told you that after you showed
My
him the
dentist.
x-rays. That was a brilliant move on your part too. You take the x-rays to your friend. He said, he's going to be coming back. That's what triggered, getting the overtime and getting the guys to surveil the place and hang out. And within 5 days, he shows up, but that's when they had already pulled the guys undercover and the secret alarm. If that secret alarm had gone off, it would have gone to LAPD and they would have got the bust, wouldn't they?
Yeah, but it didn't matter to
Right.
us. And I had mixed emotions whether I wanted him arrested or wanted him dead. One side of me just wanted him dead for everything he had done, so he couldn't do it again. But the other side of me wanted to talk to him. I wanted to gain knowledge from him.
Yeah, that had to be almost the bigger side, because you're
Yeah.
chasing this dude
Yeah.
and you're inside his head, and this has taken over your life. It's affected your family life. I gotta imagine you were desperate to talk to him at some
I
point.
was.
Yeah. So this was huge. I mean, and he did have some mangled teeth, and then he comes in, the phone rings. Wasn't it like at 10 o'clock? The dentist calls you, "Hey, where were you guys?"
Yes.
How pissed off were you to think that we were this close?
You're beyond pissed
You-
off.
you can tell us, Gil.
That's minimally stated.
Yeah.
Anytime. And that's why I loved working homicide so much. Normally, executives did not bother you because they didn't want to mess up your case. And none of the executives had ever worked murders. I don't know if they were ever even investigators. I know the Sheriff Block worked Vice for years. I don't know where his underling worked. Obviously not murders. And
So that's who without saying his name, that's what really is pissing you off, is this one person.
Yeah,
right.
Like, you son of a...
Well,
we had him.
And
we had him.
we're talking a few $1,000s overtime.
And
It's not
and
like you were renting a
I'll-
yacht.
I'll tell you something else that same executive did. We had we had identified the Avia footprint, and so he ordered us to put it up at inmate reception center. That way, if he gets arrested and we don't know who he is, the young deputies there would see the shoe and say, "Aha! There it is, the matching shoe."
Mm-hmm.
And so he ordered it against our wishes. We went in and did it. And we had a meeting with the sheriff, and he was in the meeting with us. And there were captains and other executives, and the sheriff said, "Hey, give me the only two guys that really know what's going on. I want them up front." And that was Frank and myself. And we sat there, and we told him, he said, "Anything new?" I said, "Well, they got the footprint up at IRC on the wall. See if they had any." He says, "Well, there goes that clue."
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Because young deputies, they're going to be talking about it all over the place.
Yeah.
There goes that secret.
So there's I think 27 like sheriff's offices or bureaus or whatever throughout LA, whatever. Okay, so you got to exchange information because he's hitting here, like Cato said, he's hitting all over. He eventually went to Orange County, went up to the Bay Area. Communication, sharing of information, and that was another thing that started back then. Who had the idea? Because I know it was a young Gil Carrillo at the time getting in front of the camera and sharing some of this on probably VHS tapes that they delivered to every sheriff's department office around LA. So that how important was that?
That was important. I happened to be at one of the substations one morning, and they were briefing, and I listened to a sergeant get up there and tell his people that are getting ready to go out on patrol, just BS, just information that he was pulling out of his head, and the guy was really a coward. He was weak, and I'm saying, holy Jesus, where's he getting his information? And so I went back and I talked it over with Frank. I said, Frank, we got to do something. He's putting out information. We can't be everywhere one time. I say we go to the media, our media resources, and let's put out a video. Mm-hmm. That way, one speaker, same information, and get it out to everybody. And so that's what we did.
How frequently did you record a message?
We did it twice.
Okay.
We did once, then we did a follow-up one.
Did it help? Do you think it helped?
Yeah, it made people aware because I remember being called out on a case in Pico Rivera where it was an attempted. Matter of fact, his wife and him, Deputy John Rodriguez, lived in a residence in the city of Pico Rivera, and she was sleeping on a couch and he was sleeping in the bed, and she heard some noise and she said, John, is that you? John, is that you? And he comes scratching himself out of the bedroom. Is what me? And she says, somebody just tried to come in through the
window,
the dining room window. And he says, that window's been closed for over a year. When I painted it, I never scraped off the paint. It's been sealed shut. He says, that window can't even be open without being cleaned up. He says, somebody just tried. And he pulled back the curtain and saw all the paint chips. And so somebody had. And she said, call the cops. He says, I am a cop, because he was a deputy sheriff, young deputy working the jail at the time. And right. She said, you're still in the jail. Call the real cops.
Yeah. He's got the gun at the house, at least. Right?
He's got a gun.
And
So he called deputies at a Pico station. They went down there, and some young deputy, God bless him, he had a box. He went out, and right outside the window, he saw the VSU print.
That is
And so he got a box, he covered it up, and he put that crime scene tape around two houses all the way around.
We're not going to touch that.
Nobody's going to go in. They'd have been shot if they'd have tried to get in that crime scene. Ramirez
kind of screwed up, though, because, he scopes out places and all that. So he's scoping this place out with this guy has a gun. He doesn't know that. And so that's probably one of his screw-ups. He's trying to get into this house through the window, so he probably saw the wife. Or not knowing that's a wife, possibly.
Well, if he did, that would have been it. She was alone on the couch, but that really didn't make the Zazzara house. They were separate. She was in bed and he was on the couch, and he had gone to the Zazzara house once before.
But they're older.
They were older.
Yeah. And then he'd enter in one place and exit another, and then there was that crime scene where you got the shoe print again. And that was boom, boom. That had to be a jolt of just adrenaline. Oh, my God. There was absolutely no doubt. Boom, that's our guy.
In my mind, it was.
Yeah. Well, it had to be, right? That via shoe print yet again. So I
had people telling me, I've had shoe prints before, and I'm glad it wasn't, like a Nike or something like that, right? Because there were so many of them.
That would be impossible.
Well, I think it's because the detectives, they probably thought that your theory of having just one serial killer, there's probably in the back of their head, they're going, could Gil be right? But they didn't want to admit to themselves, this young guy, he's probably right.
I don't blame them. I would have thought that I was full of hot air because nobody up to that point, nobody in criminal history had ever been documented as doing this stuff. Since that time, nobody's ever been documented doing it again. There have been no copycats.
Wow.
And the guy, FBI, they had on April 10th, we had a meeting at Monterey Park, and I was an uninvited guest. I went there, and they were talking about child abductions, and I felt like the child abductions they were talking about were related to my case. and everybody said their piece, and they got their documents, and they gave them to the FBI agent. There was one FBI agent there, and so he took all the case. And they said, "Gil, you want to talk?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I think they're all related, and here's why." And I gave my own profile, and he's okay. He says that's a good theory. So I passed on my paperwork. In July, my captain called up the FBI and said, "Hey, you guys promise, champagne and caviar. We can't even get a beer out of you. What are you guys doing? How come we haven't received this profile?" I said, "What are you talking about?" So my guy went over there in April and he gave you this stuff, and your agent sent all the stuff. He said, "Well, we got everybody else, but we didn't get your guys," because he felt that I was full of hot air, didn't want to bother the case out. So he didn't send it in April like he should have.
Wow. Well, it's a hell of a hunch that you had, and it's a hell of a limb to walk out on. And it proved to be right. And they doubted you, and who knows what could have happened if they would have believed you right away. But man, that took guts, and you must have really felt it.
Oh, I did.
Yeah.
The guy that broke me in homicide, Don Garcia, dear friend, who is now deceased, he sits there and he says, "You're really out there." He sat in my motorhome as we listened to a surveillance going on one night. He sat there with him and Louis the Danoff. Sat there with me and listened to the surveillance going on that we had. He believed in me, and I don't know that I'd have believed in me. It's a hard pill to swallow.
Right. No kidding. All right, we're going to get into the final murders here and the apprehension and how this all came together. But, I think before we do that, Richard Ramirez, he took on a life of his own, almost like an iconic rock star or something. And you forget what this guy did and how horrific this was and the panic and the fear that he caused and how nasty and terrible. And Gil spent time with him one-on-one. He interrogated him. He got to know him. So he's got a very, very different perspective. But let's not lose track of how horrific these crimes were. And it was children, it was elderly, women, men. He didn't care. He'd shoot them, stab, knife. This was as bad as it gets, isn't it? I mean, you saw all the crime scenes. You saw all the photos. Had to be the worst of everything you've seen.
Taking the eyes out.
Yeah, exactly. This guy was just pure evil, wasn't he?
Well, he was evil. Looking at the photograph, everything is very scientific to me. So it didn't, decapitation, eyes gone, And I asked him at one point in time, Mrs. Zara, the one who he took her eyes out, she had a great big T cut underneath her left breast. And she was stabbed in the abdomen and the lower pubic area. And I said, "Rich, what's the big T cut for?" And he said, "Well, I was going to take her heart out." He said, "But I didn't, I couldn't get through the ribs." Well, I guess he missed the anatomy class, and when he was in medical school, didn't realize that the ribs were there to protect the organs, so he couldn't get through. Otherwise, that's the purpose in that big cut. He was going to take her organs. But all of that, again, wasn't grotesque to me.
Right.
It was scientific.
Well, in your job, that's how you have to interpret that.
Yes.
You do, or you can't get emotionally involved, or you'd never be able to do anything. But I mean, the way he speaks about it, like he was going to take a glass of orange juice out of the refrigerator.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Take her heart out,
it was like nothing to him.
Something out of the pantry. It's
And
just
he did.
insane.
No value to life. Did he tell you that he had sex with people after death or before death?
There was no evidence of any postmortem. There was evidence of perimortem stuff. Where maybe they were about to die, but they were still pumping blood. But there was no postmortem stuff.
You mentioned that class that you took on deviant sexual behavior or whatever it was.
Yes.
But we kind of danced past it, but that had to help, right? I mean, to have a little bit of that training.
It did. That's what gave me the knowledge. I said in the beginning, that's what gave me the knowledge.
The professor at LA City College.
And it's hard for people to believe, but I will give you one example, and that is he gave in a class, you have to have an infinite amount of understanding in order to be successful. And that is, I give you a condo in Mammoth. It's snowing outside. You have no cell phones, no outside communication. You have no children, no bill collectors. Just you and that other member of society that you want with you. Flickering fireplace on the inside, soft music, both fresh out of the shower, white bearskin rug, hors d'oeuvres, little Cabernet Sauvignon, a little Jim Beam for somebody that wants it, and whatever you want. Now that when I tell you that slower, does that not conjure in your mind that's going to turn into raw and adulterate sexual intercourse at night?
Yeah.
Okay.
Romantic. Right?
Romantic. That's easy for you to understand. Now I give you a man that can't afford to go to Mammoth, that can't afford a bottle of Cabernet Sauvignon, so he's got a bottle of white port in his back pocket. Isn't with another member of society, but he's got his own member in his own hand. And he's got a book of matches because he doesn't have a fireplace, so he sets Hills of Malibu on fire. He's a pyromaniac. That is sex to him. So I understand it. The key is you don't condone it, though. So that's where you make the separation and stuff like that Morneau taught us. And so that's what he says, that it makes it easier. And it does. That's what made it easy for me to talk to Richard as if we were just a normal individual.
Right. Did, the professor that helped you out, you said it's the most two people, and he was one of the two.
Yes.
That was so important in your life.
Yes.
During the case, did you contact him and say, didn't give him all the clues, but he's someone you can confide in? Is this someone you talked to?
I went to my captain and had permission to bring him on board to assist in the investigation.
Oh, that's great.
Unfortunately, he was on sabbatical in Greece. So we didn't get him. One of the highlights, once the case was all over with, I made an appointment with him, sat down, and told him, you gave me the knowledge. And we went over a lot of the facts, and it was had to be good for him. It was satisfying. Still brings a little lump in my throat.
Sure.
That's nice.
That should be a required class, I think, almost for people that work homicides.
I don't know. I took it. The guys used to make fun of me for some of the stuff he'd come up with, And he had documentation for every case he talked about.
It's a lot like in a film. The professor's not Hannibal Lecter, but how the character Will, whatever his last name is, the character would go to him to say, "I'm so confused, Dr. Lecter. These clues are here," and he confided him. It's sort of the same thing, except your professor isn't Lecter, right?
No.
Yeah, but you know what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
It's just that he's kind of confiding that someone really smart would help.
And I loved his personality. He'd be in trouble. He'd be fired today. Sure. Because there was no political correctness. I mean, he made fun of women, made fun of everything. And he said all he wanted to do once he retired was sit on the California-Oregon border and watch traffic go. Well, drinking out on his front porch, watching traffic go by.
Well, maybe he did. Hopefully he did. That's pretty funny. Although that would get a little boring after a while. Speaking of North, things really pick up here, and we're getting to the conclusion of the whole saga. He goes up to San Francisco.
Yes.
Ramirez. Another murder. Peter Pan, the family, interesting name, strikes. What was the reason for him going to San Francisco?
He had a friend up there, Armando Rodriguez. He had friends up there. And Armando knew him from Texas, and so he went up there. I said
driving, correct?
Yeah. I said it was kind of like what he was doing was kind of like the game of Tetris. You'd play this where the ball goes up and comes down in different angles. Well, he starts in L.A., and he goes to Monterey Park. He comes back. Then he goes up to the northern end of the county, comes back, ends up in Mission Viejo, comes back up in San Francisco. So he just keeps these things keep getting bigger and bigger. Yeah. That's why he went up there.
So is he so sick? Like if we took a trip up to visit friends in the Bay Area, we'd go to a restaurant that we've heard about that we want to try, or a bar. But he's up here, I might as well kill someone? I mean, is the urge that strong, do you think?
I have no idea.
But he did.
Well, he did, but that's somebody else. Let somebody else make that determination.
But so he goes up there. Now you got another jurisdiction involved. You got San Francisco police. You got the political angle that's going on up there, which would play a huge role in this. So he goes up there, hangs out with a friend, commits the murder, kills Peter Pan's wife. Was Peter Pan killed? Did he get them both? Okay, so he two murders up there, comes back to L.A., but you guys go up there. You talk about going on the spur of a notice, like you talked to the one guy that you gave the cash to go check out that one clue with the shoes. You and Frank immediately got on a plane and bolted right up to San Francisco. By the way,
Yeah.
remember in the docuseries where the NBC reporter was on that same plane?
Yeah, Laura Erickson.
Yeah. So you're on this. She knows everything's happening too. So that's how quickly you got up there. We were able to check out the crime scene. So maybe pick it from there.
Well, I remember calling my wife saying, hey, how about getting the kids and meet me at the house? And if you get there before me, maybe just pack me some clothes for 2 days. And she says, where are you going? I said, I'll talk to you when I get there. Got there. She says, where are you going? I said, I'll tell you where I'm going, but I don't want you talking to anybody about it. Going up to San Francisco. Some information's come in. We got to go. And I said, remember, talk to nobody. We'll see. We got a 2:00 flight. Went up there. And I said, I'll call you when my family asks, hey, where's Gil? You know, what's he doing now? Just say, you know, he left town. He said he's going to call me up tonight and tell me where he's at. So I get up there, I get to the hotel, I call the wife. I said, okay, here's the hotel I'm staying at. And she says, oh, if it isn't the top-notch detective.
Right.
She says, don't tell anybody. Well, Channel 4 had it. L.A. homicide investigators headed to San Francisco, film at 11. You know, so they knew. That's why Laurel Erickson was on the plane. And she was up there to do a story. During that time, I was not a fan of Laurel Erickson. I wanted to arrest her for extortion because she actually got our captain to hold us under house arrest in the office so she could get a story. And if she didn't get what she wanted, she was going to go with the shoe print.
Right.
And so
you almost had to promise her a one-on-one exclusive.
That's what we did.
In order to not
she's
release the information about the shoe print.
Because she's trying to further her career. That's going to make her a major star.
Because you know that message gets to the killer. And that's the reason you have to hold it.
Yeah.
You can't let them know that you know.
Yeah, exactly. And that was then. Today, Laurel and I are good friends. You know, we became friends much later. But she just did everything she could. Paul Skolnick, her producer, told me, he says, Gil, she was never going to release that shoe print. She knew better.
Yeah.
And Laurel tells me, depending on who it is, do you feed the cop's ego?
Yeah.
Do you play dumb blonde and ma'am, I'm perfect? Do you bat your eyes just to get the story? And so that's what she did.
You know, and I was in TV news for 15 years at a high level as a news anchor, sports anchor. So I get that because she's doing her job.
Sure.
You're doing your job, and they don't have similar. But when it's this big and affecting the whole city, and if she's got a conscience and a soul, you know, I think you got to maybe like pull back on further in career a little bit, but at least she got the one-on-one, and that made her bosses happy.
Maybe that was her goal.
That was her goal.
Yeah.
That's what she really wanted. She wanted that. Henry Alfaro, who used to be a local newsman for Channel 7, ABC here in Los Angeles, he went up to San Francisco, and he handled things a little different. He showed up the next day when we were there, and we get out of the car, and I got to hear him go, okay, get ready, here it is, start rolling. And he comes up to me, and we knew each other from our work, and he says, Gil, what can you tell us? What's going on up here? I said, Henry, I can't talk to you. This is San Francisco. You have to talk to them. He says, okay, no problem. Off camera, and he says, okay, at least give me a cigarette. Since you can't give me a story. So I gave him a cigarette. He used to be a smoker at the time. Here, okay. He goes, Laurel Erickson, when we're in the Peter Pan, it was a second-story apartment. While we're there, there's a knock at the door, and it's Laurel Erickson. And they said, what do you want? He says, can I talk to Frank Salerno? And I said, hey, Frankie, they want you. And he didn't like me to call him Frankie. I used to joke with me. He's Frank. And I said, Frankie, they want you. And so couldn't give him a story, couldn't talk. And we went back to the hotel, and Frank says, what do you want to do? I said, let's go back to L.A. He's back in L.A. He's not up here anymore. Let's go back to L.A. That's home for him. So we get on the flight, and it's four of us sitting with the aisle in between. Frank and myself, Paul Tippin and Leroy Orozco from LAPD, and in the seat right behind us is Laurel Erickson.
All going back.
All going back, and Tippin looks and says, Frank, I think, said, well, how much did you have to pay for that seat, Laurel? And she says, they just gave it to me, or just here it is. And she says, hey, fellas, listen, we're going to fly back together. Could NBC buy you a drink? And I said, sure, no questions. I said, okay, sure. It's a short flight, so I told the attendant, get us each two. We'll take advantage of their drinks. And so we...
Expense account, yeah.
Yeah, They bought us drinks, and she says, "Okay, I just have one question I want to ask."
Of course.
And Paul Tippin, and I'll never forget, looked at her and he said, "Laurel, isn't that the same dress and shoes and outfit you wore yesterday on the way up here?" And she turned beet red and she says, "Okay, I get it. No more questions."
Oh, that is great.
Busted.
What really terrible is that this is your captain speaking, Captain Ramirez.
All right, so I'll tell you what, man, this has been amazing. So what we've got left here, and here's what we're going to do. We've got the situation in San Francisco where Ramirez's friend is exposed and it turns out to be a big help to Gil and Frank. Right. We've got the composite drawing being out. We got the name now. And we got the apprehension. And guess what? We're going to continue that on our next episode. How about a cliffhanger? You guys with me?
Yes, I like it.
You guys with me on this? We're going to finish this on the next episode. Go back and watch this a couple times to pick up everything from Gil. Cato's perspective on this thing. It's been fantastic. This has been an incredible hour and 10 minutes. And wait for the next episode where we bring this baby home with the man who tracked him down, who got him, who's a legend. We're going to talk about Gil's rest of his career. How does anything else measure up to this, the rest of your career? Just what was the family dynamics like as you're chasing the sadistic killer and you still have a family, 3 kids and everything. So that's going to be in the next episode. Listen to our podcast, follow Cato on social, follow me on social media. You know, Gil, Zeus, you've done a pretty good job back here, but do we have an HR department? He should read. This is like 41 episodes together. You should know that if I want a little more water, when I do this, you should bring it to me. I've got a problem with that, Zeus.
I would think the other thing, Tom, I think people should watch our show with Cuervo Gold.
There you go.
Zeus, if I want a drink, I'm going to tap on this table and I expect it to
I'll
be
get
here.
it for you.
And don't bring me in that cheap crap in a plastic little shot glass.
Don't you want some Jim Beam or what is it?
See what I have to deal with? All right, Zeus, good job. Cato, good job. This was awesome.
I'm on the edge of my seat for the next episode.
Gil, it's been a pleasure. We're going to come back with episode number 2 with the one and only Gil Carrillo, with the one and only Cato Kalin.
Detective Kalin to you.
I'm Tom Zenner. Thanks for watching, everybody. We will see you very, very soon.